Well, we're not directly connected to the Sarasota Gun Club. It's an independent organization of which I'm the state director and also the head coach of the Sarasota team. This is a training team where we train all kids of all ages to shoot clay targets with a shotgun.
Nathaniel, you're a man.
Nathaniel, you're up. Am I up first?
We work with a shotgun as opposed to a rifle or a handgun. And we train kids to handle a shotgun in both the hunting environment and in clay target shooting. Oh, yes. We're in the middle of our third season. The program nationwide is in its 7th year. And it's progressed from no shooters to a little over 10,000 shooters in 7 years. Fun, huh? The program takes the place of activities that some kids can't participate in. We get kids who are competitive, but perhaps don't have the skills or size to play football, to play basketball, to play baseball, although some of them do play multiple sports. But a lot of our kids are not into some of the other sports. And so this keeps them busy, it keeps them off the streets, it gets them involved in something. For instance, we have raffles each year to raise money for the club. The kids are out selling to their neighbors the raffle tickets. They are asked to help at the club, participate in the cleanup of the club and taking care of the club. So they find that this is an activity like any other activity. They can really get themselves wholly involved in it to the exclusion of a lot of other things. High on the first one, behind and high on the second one. Well, in our field with a shotgun, there are 4 basic games that we play. One of them is trap, another is skeet, and those 2 games are probably most familiar to most people. A derivation of those sports over the last 15 to 20 years has been a sport called sporting clays.
Paul!
Sporting clays is a game that's intended to simulate live bird flying, only we do it with clay targets instead of live birds. A 4th game is what we call 5-stand. And that's a game that's been created for places that have had very little space, which sporting clays require. So we've converted the game into a small space shooting environment as opposed to something that takes many acres. Well, theoretically, and I say theoretically because it is only theoretically, from a practical standpoint, it doesn't quite work, but theoretically, each station is, the flight of the targets is supposed to represent some type of game bird. It might be a duck, it might be a pheasant, it might be a woodcock, it might be whatever, a dove. All those birds fly differently, do different things in the air. And the game initially was designed to simulate hunting, real hunting. Now, we have gotten a little away from that over the years because as competition has grown in this country and the world, those targets became a little too simple, a little too easy, and therefore the target setters have now deviated and become devious, and the ruses and the tricks that they play with targets to try to make you miss the target. Watering targets do not take a lot of lead, unless you're gonna break it back here. Now, if you break it back here, it's a crossing target, isn't it? That's almost crossing. Out there, it's a real steep quarter. Okay. Sporting clays, nobody breaks them all. Quite often on an intermediately difficult course, somebody might break 94, 95, 91, 92. On a tough course, nobody will break in the 90s. So it's out of 100. So it's a much more difficult and a much more varied type of business. Sporting clays is a non-perfect sport. It's very difficult for anybody to hit all of the targets. In fact, in competitions, it's done so rarely that you can't even count them on 2 hands. In 15 years of national competition and international competition, it's probably only been done 10 to 12 times. What are you doing wrong? My first game was trap. Trap is essentially shooting with one machine, throwing one target at a time in an oscillating manner so that you don't know what angle you're going to be shooting at. So you could be shooting left, you could be shooting right or straight ahead. Usually that's shot in amounts of 25 targets at a time, with 5 shooters shooting in rotation. Nose of the bird, right on the front edge of the bird.
Pull.
Just like that.
Pull.
Just like that. Skeet is done with 2 machines. One at the outskirts of a semicircle. There's a high house, what we call a high house. That's a machine that's 12 feet in the air. And we have a low house, which is a machine that's 4 feet in the air. You progress around the semicircle in various positions in the semicircle and shoot targets out of both houses. In that case, you'll always know where the target's going. The targets are always going in the same speed, in the same direction, the same location. What happens there is you're moving. And so the angles are created by your movement as opposed to trap, where the angles are created by the machine itself. The skeet field has a couple of very easy shots, and that's why we take beginners to the skeet field. There are 2 positions where we take them, and what we call from the low house, it's the easiest target on the course, and that's where we start the kids to shoot. These are all different from sporting clays, which has usually 12 to 15 stations, 2 targets each, 30 different targets out there that you're shooting at, so the variety is immense. To me, a much more interesting game, but also the reason you don't shoot perfectly, whereas in trap and skeet, a lot of people shoot perfectly. Well, basically, most machines are very identical in how they throw a target. It's basically a sweeping arm that's on a heavy spring. They call them self-cocking, so that when one target is fired off the spring, there's a motor mechanism that revolves the arm back into place. And when you initiate what we call pushing a button on a line or a cord, it releases the spring. The target flies wherever you've decided to send it based on how you set up the machine.
Came out and came straight towards us.
Paul.
Watch out, watch out.
Well, our standard target is a 105 millimeter round object, but we also have them in 90 millimeters, 60 millimeters, about that big, flying at 40 yards, very difficult to hit. We have rabbit targets, which are hard, very thin targets that roll along the ground, a variety of targets of that type. It's a game of pairs. It's a game of throwing 2 targets, but not always simultaneously. When we start training children, we don't let them shoot pairs. We have them shoot 1 target at a time. A, for safety, so they only have 1 shell in the gun at a time. And B, it's hard enough to hit 1, never mind think about 2. As we progress, we get into the real game of shooting pairs, and there are 3 different ways of throwing pairs. One is called a report pair. That's where you have 2 machines throwing targets. One machine will throw first, and when the gun goes off, which is called the report of the gun, the second target is thrown. A little more difficult is what we call a true pair, and that's when both machines are throwing their targets simultaneously. And so you have to then prepare to shoot both birds pretty much fast and pretty immediately. There is a third way that's not popular in this country. It's called following pairs. That's when you have 1 machine and the targets are thrown as fast as that machine can throw the 2 targets, one right after the other. But with the advent of having more mechanization, more machines, we generally don't throw that type of target any longer. It's either a true pair or a report pair. Paul, what'd you change on that first one?
Big dreams and good grades aren't enough to get into college. There are actual steps you need to take. Finding someone who can help is the first and most important. For the next steps, go to knowhowtogo.org.
Everyone has friends. There's online friends. Friends to go out with on a Saturday night. Friends to hang out with and do nothing. Friends who show up on moving day. And then there are the friends who'll be there if someone is dealing with a mental illness. Are you one of those friends?
Well, we meet at 12 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. We assemble everybody in front of me. I step up on top of my platform, if you will, which happens to be a shooting cart, and go through whatever we have to talk about. Usually we start each session with a safety questionnaire. They all have safety booklets. They're supposed to study them, and we question them when they come in on the various aspects of what we call the 10 basic safety rules. We then assemble everybody into squads. We have 5 coaches who are all certified coaches. We assemble each coach with 3 or 4 shooters and 1 parent. That group of 5 was then dispersed on a plan that I set up each week as to what I want them to practice, what I want them to learn, and to coach the children in. Medical consent form. That's to give us authorization if something should happen. Well, we start with most kids. We start right from the beginning, right from the basics, and that can get a little boring for kids. So we like them to shoot a little bit to get interested. But the basics take us 3 to 4 weeks to get most of the kids drilled into the basics, and then from that point on, we call them intermediates, and we start teaching them more advanced techniques. When you override your subconscious, that's when you start pointing the gun. The question is that we eliminate the fear of the gun right off the bat. After a few weeks, they no longer have any fear of the gun. And that's because they find what a gun can do, what it can't do, what they should do with the gun, what they shouldn't do with the gun.
Pull.
Get on it, and pull away.
That's a good shot.
So part of our whole training program is the safety, not only on the range, but in the home. We have booklets that stress how to handle weapons in the home, what to do with them in the home, how to keep them safe and so forth, as well as where do you point the gun, where you don't point the gun, and so forth. Well, first of all, they have to have an interest in the sport. Secondly, they must be doing well in school and stay doing well in school, because this takes time, and we don't want to take time away from somebody who isn't doing well at his schoolwork. But our criteria is basically 5th graders through high school. And that's it. Well, our organization provides the ammunition and the shooting fees for the kids. The kids don't have to have a gun. We do have club guns that we loan them, let them use. But eventually and very quickly, most of them want to have their own gun if they don't already have one. And it's much better for them to have their own gun because there's a thing we call gun fit. And if the gun doesn't fit your body size, your neck size, and so forth properly, it's a hindrance to breaking targets. And so when you have your gun can be adjusted to fit you, and it does afford you a much easier time hitting targets.
Oh.
Second one. Yeah, obviously everybody has to have eye protection, and they have to have ear protection. That's one of the things we look at real quickly. Once in a while the kids will flip their glasses up on top of their cap, and we whack them in the head and say, put your glasses on. Literally. The 10 rules of safety, which are basically what to do with the gun and how to point it and what not to do with it and how not to carry it over your shoulder. Kids are tempted to wave the gun around without having good control of it if they haven't been taught the proper way to handle a gun. The proper way to carry a gun is this way. Many times they'll have it reversed with a barrel over the back. That's a no-no. Or they'll carry it pointing somewhere. That's a no-no. The gun should be pointed at the ground or straight up in the air, and should always be open so that anybody can see that there's no ammunition in the gun. That's the number one criteria for safety, is always, when you're carrying a gun, is to have your gun open so that anybody can see there's no ammunition in it. There you go. The other type is what we call a semi-automatic. The shells are loaded in the side, and it automatically ejects the shells out automatically and feeds another one when you've shot. That gun is carried a little differently than this gun. That gun should be carried either pointing up, straight up in the air, or down at the ground, with always the mechanism open, again, so anybody can see that the gun is not loaded. Our smaller kids don't use a full-size weapon. They use a youth gun, which is a smaller version of what I'm holding here. It's generally almost 10 or 12 inches shorter than this particular weapon, and they can therefore handle it. We also have the children start with a smaller gauge gun. That's a smaller shell, less recoil, less pellets, etc. And so anybody from the 5th grade up can handle a weapon like that fairly easily. Well, we currently have 3 5th graders, and all 3 of them shoot very well. They're all in their 2nd year. Came in when they were in the 4th grade, and they do very well, very well. Well, the first thing that you have to do is to find out what we call is the dominant eye. If you raise a gun to your right shoulder and you happen to be left eye dominant, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to break targets, because you're looking at an angle rather than down the line of the gun. So we test everybody for eye dominance, and hopefully the right eye dominance will be shooting right-handed and the left eye dominance will be shooting left-handed. Once that's established, the next critical thing is to teach them the stance, their feet, their knees, their hips, their shoulders, their hands, without a gun. Just the stance of how to stand without a gun. The next step becomes putting the gun in their hand and training them as to how to hold the gun properly, where to hold it properly, and so forth. It's a simple sport. However, there are a lot of little intricate details that go into it. If you don't do them all right, you don't hit targets. One little thing wrong is magnified, because you're shooting at targets that are anywhere from 25 to 50 yards away in general. And if your gun is off angle, high, low, right or left, by 1/8 of an inch at 40 yards, you're missing by 3 feet. And that's all geometry. The angle is creating this distance at that distance. So it's very, very critical that you become consistent. You mount the gun exactly where it has to be every time. And in order to do that, we use the cheekbone, which is where the gun is supposed to be resting, with pressure, so that your eye becomes the rear sight, essentially, of the gun, and looks right down the barrel of the gun in a nice level plane towards the target. 25 times. All beginners cant their head to the gun. They drop the head to the gun, which is a no-no in the sport. You're supposed to raise the gun to the head, not the head down to the gun. And the reason is, when you drop your head to the gun, you cant your head. And we try to teach the kids that you don't look at things with your head like this, you look at things with your head like this. And that's the way you're supposed to shoot over your gun, with your head erect, not canted to the side.
He's going to lean into the target like this. He's not going to mount it back here. The reason for that, if you mount it back here, you're going to shoot over the target, generally.
Well, Jack was the one that got me involved in this program. Jack Smart is a long-time shooter, hunter. He hunts and shoots all over the world. And he had heard about this program, the national program, as I said. And he called me one day and said he was thinking about starting a youth organization in Sarasota. With my credentials, he wanted to know if I'd be interested in taking over as head coach, which I did. Jack's an old friend, and I was glad to join in because I was looking for something to do. I had given up the tournament trail the year before, stopped shooting internationally, and so the 2 of us started this program. We got involved, organized, recruited kids, and started. And Jack is a great assistant coach. He likes to work with the real beginners, which he's very good at.
Okay, now, so
If you take a raw beginner, it's going to be several years before they're in any position to compete. But we push the kids into competition fairly quickly. That doesn't mean they're going to succeed in competition, but it does expose them to the competitive aspect of the sport. And they enjoy it, they like it, most of them, and those lessons of competition are the same as you get from competition in other sports. The adrenaline rushes, you get nervous, you make mistakes, but once they learn how to handle that, they become more accomplished shooters.
Listen up, Energy Hogs. We got a real porker of a house here. Get in there and waste some energy.
There's no insulation, boss. It's hog heaven.
Leaky windows, too. This is gonna be a breeze.
Perfect. Go wild and waste some wattage.
Time to tan. Oh, there's hot water for just one pair of pants. My kind of place.
Wow, this thing's so old it's gonna take me hours to get dry.
Keep wasting. They'll never know what hit them till they get the energy bill.
What the? Boss, they're home, and they've got energy-efficient bulbs.
You've got the power to get rid of energy hogs. You can help your parents add insulation, put in Energy Star appliances, and lots of other things to make your home hog-free. Find out how at energyhog.org and play fun games, too.
Oh, retreat! Retreat!
Go to energyhog.org and get the energy hogs out of your home.
Hey, wait for me!
Pull.
Now move. Well, the best instruction is always one-on-one. That's impossible when you have 30 kids and 5 or 6 coaches. So our method is basically, as I said earlier, to send a coach and a parent along with 3 or 4 kids out into whatever station or area we want them to shoot. And then during the next 2 or 3 hours, I proceed to go through all of the shooters out there, driving from post to post to post, and working with each kid individually for 10 or 15 minutes. The coaches have been working with them. I come along, I step in, and then I just emphasize what the coach has been doing, or just observe the student when he's shooting and make some little corrections. They all appreciate having the head coach talk to them individually. Oh, nice shot.
Much better.
Much better. Interestingly enough, when they first get together and they're not concerned about team activities, sometimes they'll razz shooters who miss targets. Sometimes they'll get on somebody's back. By the time we're done with us, they're cheering the other guy on, whether he hits or misses. And there's a camaraderie that they've learned through our program, like they do in any real sporting activity, basketball, baseball, football, whatever. It's the same with us. They begin to become teammates and cheer the other people on. So that's the number one thing. The other thing is that we're very conscious about courteousness and treating everybody well, not being rude to adults and that sort of thing. That's all part of what goes on in this program, and I think they learn it quite well with us.
There you go. Good job. All right, and prepare for fun.
The whole program is centered around a team concept. We develop 3-man teams. Those teams go into competition against other clubs, in club. We have a state championship, and we have a national championship where kids compete with other teams all over the country. But none of you are breaking 100. Okay? When they get a little bit of success, it becomes contagious, and they get excited. The first few weeks they're out with us, they're not hitting many targets. They're not really happy, but they're still striving and working. But with every one of our shooters, at some point in their progress, we say the light bulb goes on. The concept of what we're trying to teach hits, and all of a sudden they start breaking targets with more consistency, and that's when they get excited, and they stay excited. It's quite a thrill to hit a moving target that's flying through the air with a shotgun. And when you can do that consistently, it's very rewarding to these kids.
I thought it was interesting to watch those guys because...
Well, I had never shot a shotgun until I was in my mid-50s. I had always been a handgun and rifle shooter. A friend introduced me to the sport of trap down here at the Sarasota Trap and Skeet Club after I couldn't play golf anymore because of a bad back. And I took to it immediately. I enjoyed shooting trap for a number of years. In 1995, I was state champion in trap. Figured I had accomplished all that I could in that, and I decided to move into sporting clays, which was basically just starting to get popular in this country. I got into sporting clays in 1994 or 95, and that seemed to be a natural sport for me. And then after a lot of hard work, a lot of lessons with a lot of coaches, in the year 2003, I became the super veteran national and world champion. And again, having achieved that particular goal, I found nothing else to do, so therefore the kid training is sort of a natural offshoot when you're done competing.